Today we're going to look at how to create your own signature sound. I'm going to go through 5 iconic pedals and how to use the pedal to create your own signature sound. So let's start off by looking at your basic sound and just getting a great tone, right? So I usually start with something like this, right? This is my basic sound. And it's a sound where it's dynamic, and you can go, just by how hard you pick, you can go from very clean so as you pick harder, it starts to break up a little more. And that's the sound that most of the great players start with. Now the problem with that is there's something really magical about playing through a real tube amp, but they're designed to be very, very loud, right? So I'm playing through a Bassman right here, and if I crank this amp all the way up, my wife would not be very happy, right? So when you're practicing in your bedroom, a great middle ground to do this is use one of these types of pedals. So the ones we got here on the board is the Blues Driver and the Morning Glory. And these are 2 pedals that I use frequently, and they're not very like high gain pedals. They simulate the sound of a cranked tube amp. Here's the sound with the pedal off. So you can see it's not got as much character. It's still a good tube sound, but it's not a lot of character. And then, you know, you add in something like this and it just makes it bigger and better. So here's the Morning Glory. That's the pedal I use the most. That one's on all the time. It's just got a great... Now I've got a little bit of reverb and a tiny bit of echo on there as well, just to kind of give it a big room sound. So this pedal, the Morning Glory, is kind of based on the Marshall Blues Breaker circuit, which is actually a pedal that Marshall came out with. And it basically was designed to give you that kind of famous Clapton tone, like on the Beano album, which essentially is a Marshall Blues Breaker, you know, like a 50-watt Marshall cranked up, an incredible sound, right? So that's the sound. This circuit is the basis for a lot of the kind of pedals on the boutique market. Okay, so this one by JHS, you know, things like the King of Tone by Analog Man. There's a lot of variations of this type of transparent overdrive, because what it does is it takes the sound of your guitar and just makes it better. It doesn't change the character of the guitar. It doesn't change the character of your amp. It just kind of like, it's almost like it brings it to life. You know, so it goes from... to... You're taking the sound of your guitar and you're pushing it into that pedal, into these like tube-like circuits that essentially use soft clipping, and they boost the signal, and they add that tubey character to the sound, you know, adding warmth and harmonics and just vibe to the sound. And then there's the Blues Driver, which came out in the 90s. You know, this is a slightly more modern pedal. You know, John Mayer, Prince. You know, here's the John Mayer sound, right? So it's very expressive, and basically this pedal here, the Blues Driver, is designed to sound like a cranked Fender, which is chimey and warm, scooped, and it's got a little bit of that fizz that you get when you crank up a Fender. So it's a bright sounding pedal, and it really kind of really opens up your sound. So these 2 pedals are a great place to start. So you can go from clean, just from the way you're picking and the way you're adjusting your tone and volume. What you want to do is start with something that's transparent. It's going to keep your basic tone of your guitar and your amp, and it's just going to kind of bring everything to life just by giving you that tubey magic. So the next thing is you've got what I call the color sound, and this is where you're creating a voice for when you want to go into leads or riffs and things like that. So you're going to add in a pedal that is going to give you a different sound. It's going to give you something that has character to it. So one of the best ways of doing that is basically through a mid-range boost. So think about, Clapton's Woman Tone. In fact, what he does to get that sound is he actually has a mid-range boost built into his guitar. So when he goes to his solos, he'll just bring up his tone control and it pushes the mids forward, so you get this kind of like rich sound that cuts through the mix. Now, the way that a lot of other players do that is to use this guy, a Tube Screamer. So this pedal is famous for its kind of mid-range hump. So the guy that's famous for this, obviously, is Stevie Ray Vaughan. So, you can hear him. So he uses this pedal to enhance that mid-range and punch through the mix, right? So say if we go our bass tone. And then for our solo, throw in the Tube Screamer. Just make it squeal. So the Tube Screamer is another overdrive, and basically what it does is it pushes the existing sound. So it's perfect for solos, right? So it gives you this kind of thicker sound. Now this pedal particularly works well with something like a Strat going into a Fender, right? Now if you're using a PRS into a Mesa Boogie or something like that, you probably want a pedal that's the exact opposite, like a Rangemaster or something like that, something that's gonna make it more trebly. So it's not a one size fits all. You have to kind of like tailor your sound to the equipment that you're using. But it's an iconic pedal, and a lot of players use it. But it's still a pretty flexible pedal. So one of the most important things when you're working with pedals and sculpting your sound is to understand what the tone controls do. So with most pedals, basically, you've got your gain, and what the gain does is how hard you're hitting the circuit. Inside the pedal, there's op amps and there's transistors acting like tubes, and how hard you hit that circuit is going to determine how much you break up. So usually with a Tube Screamer, what I'll do, and a lot of people do this, is they'll have the drive pretty low, so you're just adding one other kind of stage of gain. So you're going from a beautiful kind of tubey sound, and then adding this extra level, just makes it speak and pushes it forward. But there's tons more gain there if you just push that gain up, and you can hear. So you can get a lot of sounds out of it. Now the EQ, or the tone on the pedal, is really important to understand. What does it actually do, right? So with this one, it's basically you're shaping the mids, right? So when you turn, and a little rule of thumb whenever you're working with pedals is start by putting the EQ in the middle, because that's the kind of sweet spot where most of these pedals just kind of give you a balanced sound, and then you sweep it back and forth and you see what it does. So in this case, when you turn I'm starting right here in the middle. When you turn it up, you're increasing those mids. You're pushing the mids and making it brighter. Whereas if I go back to the middle there, it's more of the balanced sound. If I go to the left, what it's gonna do is pull down the highs. So it's gonna give it a warmer, richer sound. So it's a more controlled, warmer sound. So I usually run it like right there in the middle, run the gain low, and then with the level or the volume is the final output level after you've gone through all the components in the pedal, and it's basically where you can kind of match unity gain or just push the amp a little bit more. So you can go from turn it off there, and then usually what you want to do with the level is just push it a tiny bit, so you're just kind of pushing the amp a little bit harder, but not too much. So when you turn it on and off, you're just getting a minor boost. A lot of people love that pedal, a lot of people hate the pedal, but some people want to mod them to make them more transparent. That's cool. You get some really good versions of that, but you're not really looking for transparency at this point. You're looking for that voice. So you're looking for a way to be able to kind of stand out in the mix. All right, third is your signature lead sounds. So, you know, for example, if you want to achieve like amazing violin like tone, you know, lots of sustain and just a killer lead sound without getting into like crazy shredding, buzzing, nasty territory, then you got to shape the sound. So, for example, if you take someone like Gilmour, you know, when you hear his sound, so you can hear just tons of sustain, and it's just a very expressive sound. So what he's using, he'll use something like a tube driver over here to kind of push the amp, and he's using a Hiwa amp, it's got a very open, big sound, and then he'll use a big muff, which is a fuzz pedal, high gain fuzz pedal. So let me show you kind of how I'd approach getting that sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the blues driver on, kind of like the tube driver, to push the amp, and then I'm going to turn the big muff on, and I'm going to go to the back pickup. So that's the basic sound, and then what I'm doing is I've got the sustain, which is the fuzz, that's the drive, I've got that down low. Now the tone control on this is an interesting one. It's different from the tube screamer. The tone control is a mid-range boost or cut. So as you turn it, so it adjusts the mids and turns them up or down, so it creates kind of like either a hump or a scoop in the mids. Or all the way up. Mosquito tone. You know, so I'm running it kind of in the middle, like that, and I've got the sustain down low. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of compression. I'm going to add a little bit of delay as well. So you can see there, you've got loads of sustain. It's very dynamic. You can hear the little pick scrapes. And just by adjusting the volume, you can create some really beautiful, sustained singing sounds. So you see there, shaping a sound using a very intense fuzz sound, but with some compression and some delay and kind of running it over a tubey sounding amp. You can create a signature sound that is absolutely beautiful. And then we get into the rat territory. So this rat, great pedal. You know, a famous rat player is Jeff Beck. You know, so he's using a Marshall, right? So we'll start with this JHS sound. Put on the rat, got some delay on there, and so the rat is aggressive and it's distortion, right? But it's also very expressive, and you can, you know, with your volume control, you can create a whole kind of spectrum of different sounds. So the thing is, once you put together your own personal playing, your own fingers, your own guitar, your own amp, and then you start to kind of sculpt your sound by finding the sweet spot on these pedals and then stacking them together, 1, 2, 3, you know, adding a little bit of reverb and delay, you're going to create your own sound that no one else has that sound, because just there's so many variables in there that you can tailor it to exactly your own kind of, you know, what you're trying to say. And obviously you can emulate your heroes and stuff like this, you know, use some of the gear they're using, but you can make it your own, you know, and no one's going to have the same exact sound as you. So you can have a lot of fun with this, and all these pedals are under $150. Some of them are less than $100. So it's a great thing if you want to get a little Christmas present for yourself or put it on your Christmas list. Buying one of these is a great little addition to your kind of lineup, to your arsenal of gear. And I think it's a very inspiring just sometimes to kind of get a new piece of gear and just try some different sounds. And don't think of it as just like, one pedal is one sound, but think of it as adding a color or adding, this different voice to your existing kind of setup. Anyway, tell me what are some of your favorite pedals. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And remember, actually, particularly in this case, turn it up.